Welcome to the 62nd episode of the interview series. The interview series is a production of One Week Critique, an Iowa-based arts and education nonprofit that offers educational resources and editorial support to students and teachers of the literary arts. You can learn more about us and our programs or support our work by visiting our website, oneweekcritique.com. That's the number one, weekcritique.com. And please like and subscribe to help us continue producing valuable content. I'm Matthew Schmidt, joined today by Nina Lohman. Originally from California, Nina lives in Iowa City and is the founder of Brink, a literary journal dedicated to hybrid and cross-genre writing. She serves as the literary programming director for the Mission Creek Festival, an annual immersive music and literature festival honoring independent expression. A 2023 Iowa Artist Fellow, her writing has been supported by the Vermont Studio Center, the Sewanee Writers Conference, and the Iowa Arts Council. She's at work on a collection of micro-essays on the subject of release. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So today we'll be looking at some sections of The Body Alone, a lyrical articulation of chronic pain, and that is out on University of Iowa Press in July. So I thought first we'd just start talking about hybrid writing in general. What is it, and how does The Body Alone articulate hybridity?
So hybrid writing is writing that uses more than one modality to tell the story that it needs to tell. So it is writing that can use visual images or, sorry, I've got a dog here that's very excited. It can combine multiple literary elements. It's any type of writing that is a realized way of telling a story. And I like to distinguish it from experimental in the sense that it's not experimenting. Hybrid writing is realized. It is the form that a story needs to take on the page. It's not just moving things around. We're not playing. We're being really intentional about telling a story in a specific way and using multiple elements to do that. So The Body Alone is a hybrid text in the sense that it combines multiple elements. It has a section that is memoir. And when I say section, it's all like moved throughout. It's not a very linear book. It combines research. It has primers, has vocabulary lessons. It has all these different sections that, when layered, when brought one after the other, it tells a story by laying the book out that way, by choosing those elements and having them be in conversation and in conflict with one another.
And so, just to distinguish maybe a little bit more from hybridity versus experimentation,
Yeah.
if one is starting out and writing or trying to write hybridly, how do you move, say, from experimentation to hybridity?
It's a great question. I love experimenting, and it is absolutely something I do. It is a big reason why this book is the way that it is. I think that there's such a time and a place for that play, for that experimenting, for that crumpling it all up and starting again, trying different things out. And that's in the writing process. That's what happens on your desk. That's what happens when you are creating the piece, when you are trying to unravel a complicated story, especially. I think that's where it is absolutely essential that we have permission, that we give ourselves permission to try different things out. Does this work? Does that work? Is this getting where I need it to go? It's not. To listen to that resistance, to be brave, to try some different things that would break form. So I think that what changes is when it clicks into place, and when you have experimented, when you have tried things out, when you have let the story kind of be on the page as it needs to be on the page, you'll know and you'll feel it, and you will be able to look at it and say, that's what I was trying to do. That's the story I was trying to tell, because the nuance is there, because, fill in the blank, whatever it is, it has realized itself on the page. So that distinction matters to me.
Excellent. Yeah. So I think first we'll look at an early draft here, or a section of an early draft, just so we can get some words in the air and get our readers a chance to take a look at what you're working on here. So if you could just read this one page here, then we'll talk a little bit about it.
Says, a friend says, maybe this is your cross to bear. Hers, a silver pendant, hangs just below the jugular notch of her neck. And then my notes, looks like these notes came from two different times of editing. The first one, room for more tension, how she feels missed or not understood, explain how painful this was. And then below, endure for the greater glory.
Excellent, thank you. So I was really interested in that endure for greater glory. And I was wondering if maybe you could explicate, what you mean by that and how you went about accomplishing that.
Mhm. One of the goals for these sections was for me to create characters where there were really just sentences or words to kind of put a whole person on the page. So I think what I was trying to do, what those notes were drawing me towards, was a way of creating a more full character, both for this person that I'm representing, and also like my character, the me, in that part right there. I think when I was talking about endure for the greater glory, I was specifically talking about this person. This was a real thing. This is what happened. And that is a reference to her understanding of religion and of her faith system and her belief that pain is something that you endure for this greater connection, greater glory, greater understanding of a deity, of a God. Um, and that fit into her framework of like her worldview and her understanding of pain. And it was so hurtful and so foreign to have someone say that to me, to kind of just lay that as an excuse on top of my pain.
Yeah, definitely. And you studied theology, right? So maybe you could talk a little bit about how that informed the book.
It definitely did. So, when headaches started for me, I don't even know if we've even mentioned this. So I have chronic
Yeah.
daily headaches, the thing that I kind of wrote the book about. So I have headaches, and it started for me when I was in graduate school, about 17 years ago, and it kind of came out of nowhere, completely out of the blue. I woke up one morning with a headache, and it has not gone away. There are times when it goes away, but like as a whole existence, it's what I live with to this day. So I was in graduate school, I was studying theology, and I was really drawn to theology for a few different reasons. One, because I loved this story. I loved the arc of this story. I didn't grow up in a religious household. I did not have that as a like a childhood indoctrination or like a set way of understanding the world or myself or my body. There was a little bit in high school where I like kind of dipped my toe into some youth groups and was trying to be like, oh, there's something here that I really like. And I'm very drawn to. And I think that I was mostly drawn to the story and the language and the way that I saw religion providing some structure, providing some answers, some community, some just some ways for understanding the world. And that was appealing to me. And so I was drawn into theology in part because when I finished school, my undergraduate degree, I was interested in this kind of trifecta of how stories are told and how religion and place influences the stories that are told. And I had hoped to kind of go on and study that realm a little bit more. And so this was the first step of that to get an education in theology because I was interested in it. I was interested in the conversations that happened around it. It was something I didn't know a lot about and felt like I needed. There was plenty of opportunity to learn more there. So yeah, I started with that, and then that's where headache started, and it kind of derailed any of that attempt at the time to move forward with more education or that life path that I thought that I was on. So I think that when it comes to understanding the world, understanding my body, understanding kind of all of that together, I try to make sense of it through stories, through understanding whether it's through medicine or philosophy or theology, trying to locate my story inside of this larger one.
Yeah, and so when we talk about the body alone, right, let's talk a little bit about these different sections. We'll have you read a few of them here later, but in order to tell the story, you use sections like treatment records, vocabulary lessons, and so on. The specific one we'll talk about, uh, there is a moment where you have a discussion about bloodletting alongside an experience visiting an urgent care clinic for medication that the doctor won't prescribe. Uh, do these sections all stem from the early draft, or how did you arrive at these types of sections? And, how did you determine how to order them throughout the book?
Everything stems from, I had about 6 or 10 pretty traumatic medical experiences and was holding those very tightly within my body. So this whole project started because I was looking for catharsis, for a way to get those stories out of my body and onto the page. So I had this collection of hurts that I had written down, and I had thought that maybe I could turn that into an essay, and I kept trying to create an essay or multiple essays out of these stories, and it just kept falling flat. There was nothing there. And so I started to pull in, and this is where the experimenting, the trying, the trying to figure out what this story was. I started pulling in other records, some of my medical records, looking at some of those, just drawing from the language, the exact language that was in those, and trying to understand how I could tell the story of my experience in a way that felt like the experience. That was really important to me, to capture the not just the language or the plot points of what happened to me along the way, but that the audience, the reader, whoever that may be, would take this in and be like, oh my gosh, this is what it feels like to have gone through this experience. So it does all kind of draw from that experience of like getting those of catharsis, of trying to get it all down. And then in terms of order, God, I wrote this thing for a long time, maybe 6 years or so of the actual writing and editing and moving. So there have been a lot of drafts. What has stayed consistent throughout is this sort of flow between, there are memoir sections, and then it's pocketed in with all those other sections that we have talked about. And so those little ones, everything moved around and everything has kind of lived in different spots at one point or another. But I feel good about the way that it has come together, and that I think there's a lot of points for, like I said, conversation between sections that are brought together, as well as some really intentional conflict and some really intentional just dropping off, because again, that's what the experience feels like.
Yeah, and the idea of pain, of naming your pain, is discussed in the book and with friends. And early on, there's a sentence, quote, "We name the unknown so that we might someday understand it." Eventually, you do name your pain, and the book recounts a slew of attempts at understanding that pain, how to think about it, the various drugs and therapies that have been tried. With the subject matter as indefinable as chronic pain, how did you decide what to leave in and what to remove from the book?
Mm. That's a good question. I do think that this is, again, because it took so many years to write this, I have a strong writing group and writing community, people who have looked at it, who have asked important questions that felt overlooked, that were overlooked by me, like, hey, where are we in time? How many years have we been here? What's going on? I feel like I want more of this part where you talk about you expose this part of your vulnerability, that I want more of that. So hearing from other people what landed, where it stalled, what they didn't necessarily want, that was really helpful. I did have someone who was helping me at one point who had a very different understanding of where the project was trying to go and wanted a lot more external research. And I did a ton of research and this was when it was pretty realized, I would say like 80–90% there. I kept trying to like maneuver this external research into the story, and it just never felt right. It didn't fit. And I'm glad I've done that research. I'm glad that I have that knowledge and that information, but it didn't, again, it was just that feeling inside of like, God, I can't quite find the angle for this to work. The voice is so different. It's not anchored in any part of my story. It just feels like I'm writing an article about it and trying to squeeze that in. And yeah, it was an intuition.
Gotcha. Yeah. So a lot of it based on feel then, in the end, as well as voice and finding the way, the vehicle in which to tell the story. So actually, let's hear a little bit more of that story. I'll bring up the what we call the final drafts, um, and I'll ask you to read this first little one here.
Mhm. I will do my best. I don't know all of these medications. I have ingested them, but I don't know their names. So give me grace.
Certainly, certainly.
So these are I have these sections throughout. At kind of the end of there are 7 sections in the book, and at the end of each section, there's these treatment records, which is what you're seeing here, and that is a way of listing almost every medication and test and supplement and treatment that I've gone through in that phase of time. So treatment records 2 years in, medications, Valium, Imitrex, Compazine, DHG, I think, Depacone, Regulin, Prednisone, Zomig, alprazolam, Topamax, duoxetine, gabapentin, Cymbalta, baclofen, ibuprofen. And then tests, lumbar puncture, CT scan of the brain with contrast, CT scan of the brain without contrast, MRI brain scan, MRA cerebral scan, CBC blood panel, diabetes, kidney, liver, thyroid scan, heavy metal screening, celiac, pregnancy, urine, supplements, vitamin D, vitamin B2, vitamin B12, alternative treatments, chiropractic adjustments, acupuncture, Reiki, massage, therapy, naturopathic healing.
Excellent. Thank you. So I like how, you've talked about time uh, throughout the book, and in certain ways, the book is cyclical. Right? Things continue to return throughout the book. Um, and, we have these different types of attempts to uh, alleviate the pain, to find some way to, make it stop or at least lessen. Um, and you have the timestamp 2 years in. These are the things that I've done. Um, and I love lists. I think I've told you this. And even if I don't understand all the drugs either, it's the naming of the thing in a way, as well as just the combined amount of attempts. And some of those things stay the same over the years, and some of them change as new things are tried. And I do think the book does an excellent job of having those timestamps where necessary. At times, it, you're not exactly sure where you are because some of the essayistic portions are hypothetical. But it does enough for me to understand like where I am throughout the book, and it still has right this rising and lowering action in certain ways. So I think fantastic job with that. Um, and I also like how we have the scientific things at the top of that, And then we have these other treatment methods because the scientific methods are not working,
Hmm.
right? So, I mean, just looking at that one page, that is so much stuff. Like, just, uh, it's interesting to compress the time because it also expands the time,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Because while it's all on a single page, that didn't all happen at one moment, right? So, it's fascinating the way time moves throughout the book. Um, you know, I was thinking about how you can pick up and put the book down at
Mhm.
different times without losing anything. And yet, the length of the book enacts the chronicness of the pain because it's over 300 pages. Um, Maybe you can talk a little bit about constructing the book for an audience.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So I do think that it's that's one of my favorite things about seeing it actually being able to flip through it is that I do think it's readable. You can, like you said, you can pick it up and put it down. The sections are short but intense. And because they're so intense, you need those breaks and you need to be able to set it down and exhale. When I thought about audience for this book, I hope this isn't too solipsistic, but I thought of myself like 10 years ago. What did I need to read then? What did I want to read then? Because I've read a lot of illness narratives. I've read so many books about people with pain and with trying to understand what's happening inside of their broken bodies. And um, I there wasn't nothing quite snagged the way that I wanted it to. So my audience that I had in mind for writing this book was mostly people who, like myself, live with chronic pain, who have had these experiences, whether it's pain or something, fill in the blank, anything like some type of experience in their body that has been underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed, um, and hoping for that audience to feel seen, to recognize that they are not alone. I was told for so long that I was basically a medical anomaly, and they're like, "We don't know what this is. We don't know what's going on, or we have no idea what might be happening here, or how to make it better." And I settled for that answer for a long time. And through writing this book, through research, through conversations, was able to turn a corner with that, I'd say in the last few years, and come to the understanding that, hey, wait, hold on. It's not me. There are millions of people who have this kind of situation, who are living this. And a lot of them are younger, a lot of them are women, a lot of them are in this situation like me. There is a problem here, and it's not us individuals. It is an institution. It is this way that medicine and our culture have grown in one direction and not another. And so that's been insightful and has been part of my audience all along.
This might be kind of a left field question, but have you thought about somehow using the book and going to someone or an organization or someone in the scientific field and being like, hey, what can be done uh,
Mhm.
for people in situations like this? I don't know. Do you have any ideas of how that might happen or work?
Yes, I do. And I have been in some conversations with, we live here in Iowa City. We have a fantastic teaching hospital. And I'm in some early conversations with folks of what would it look like to be in rooms with doctors, with medical students, and talk about this, to share my experience of what it has been like, what it feels like still to be in this. How can we use something like this as a point for education and for conversations that can hopefully help affect actual and real change? I'd love that. Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and the other thing about medicine is it's a practice, and I don't know. It's one thing to be able to figure out what's going on in a body. It's another thing to treat it, and it's another thing to pay for it, right? So there's all of these layers of things. Um, it can be very frustrating, especially if your insurance doesn't cover it. Um, and maybe you're not even insured. So there are a lot of barriers and things that stand in the way of people seeking help through the medical field. And I don't know that I have a question here. It's more of something I thought about during the book, um, and how difficult that can be for any given person.
Absolutely. I think about it all the time, that I have so much privilege in this that I have insurance. I am able to get help for people to watch my kids when I need to go to appointments. I have a job that will be flexible and allow me to go to those appointments, or if I'm not feeling well, to readjust my schedule. And it's still so damn hard. And so to add more barriers, to remove any of those people or those places of help or contact or comfort, it just, my God, yeah, it is. There are a lot of systems in need of repair, to help reorient where we need to be.
Uh, at one point in the book, you talk about running because, quote, it affords you complete control of your body. Uh, how do you control a narrative that has no endpoint? And, you know, this is kind of has to do with the medical field as well. Like, how do you keep your composure in the face of systems that are very difficult to manage or maneuver?
For the first part of the question, what was it? Control? Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, how do you control a narrative with no endpoint?
Yeah, yeah, that's a please tell how do you control it?
Yeah,
You
exactly. How do you
know,
control any narrative?
right, right. That's been an interesting part of this process too. I still have this. I still live with this. I've had a shitty week with my body and with pain and trying to make my way through the rest of my life. And it's this very strange balance between when I'm trying to write about it. I had a very wise friend who cautioned me early on in this process. He's like, "Be careful, like you're spending a lot of time with pain here. You're living it every day. You're trying to tell this big story. You're making it your art. Like, be careful. Step away. Like, don't let it do more than it needs to do in your life." And that was wise. And there have been times where I've had to step totally away from it. I'm not sure that that has anything to do with control so much as it has to do with being wise about my energy. Um, but I think I'm telling this story because it's been interesting to figure out, how do you put your finger on something that's still moving? How do I tell this story? That's not just a book. It's not just a narrative. It's a reflection of the life that I'm living that is thankfully still moving and still going forward. So I think there, was trying to find some boundaries in there, trying to create some patterns that would reflect a certain section of this story. And so to maybe put some loose boundaries on it and then feel like I can control this. I can control how this story feels, how it comes out on the page. And I think the book has a very open ending, which was incredibly intentional. It's the ending is it calls back and it calls forward, and that mattered a lot to me to reflect this ongoing nature of all of it. And then in terms of composure, I think that there are absolutely times for composure and absolutely times to break that and to resist and to refuse and to be loud and to um, find our voice and let it be what it needs to be in this moment, because that's how change will happen.
Definitely. Yeah. So let's look a little bit more at this.
Okay. All right. Aeonian throbbing of thick blood through paper veins overwhelms my senses. I crave bloodletting as a means of decreasing this untamable pulse. If only. Such practices are frowned upon these days. Instead, we follow a more conventional trend when it comes to lessening the sensation of blood pounding against the thin walls of our veins. I reach to the back of a cabinet and rattle the orange bottle in my fist, even though I know it's empty. It's the weekend, and the pain has reached an intolerable level. It is as if I have twice as much blood as my body can handle. I can feel it squeezing its sticky way through my veins. I'm lethargic. I worry I will burst right here in the middle of the kitchen, a mess of torn flesh, hair, fragments of bone, pieces of organs splayed across the wall, counter, in the sink. I toss the empty bottle in the recycling and reach for my keys and drive to the closest emergency care clinic. Once inside, I offer my name and proof of insurance to the board receptionist. I walk to the couch and wait and wait. How much blood would I have to lose to weaken this throbbing pulse? A young and trim medical assistant calls my name. She asks me to step on the scale. She takes my temperature, pulse, blood pressure. I explain that I have headaches. I tell her the pain has reached a level I can no longer handle. I ask her to look in my chart to see the record of past prescriptions. I tell her I haven't refilled the prescription in nearly a year because I so rarely take the strongest medication available to me. Sit tight, she says. The PA will be in soon. How deep would the cut need to be to relieve the pressure? It doesn't matter how long I wait. It doesn't matter what he looks like or how much time he spent with me in that cold, sterile room. It doesn't matter if he ran tests or asked questions or listened or expressed empathy. None of this matters because he doesn't believe my pain is real. He does not trust me. He won't listen to my words about my body. He tells me he doesn't feel comfortable refilling my prescription because he's not my regular provider. He says people come in looking for the type of medication I am looking for. We just have to be careful, you know. He tells me I should schedule an appointment with my primary physician when the office opens Monday morning. He suggests I rest. He suggests I drink extra water. Have I tried placing a cool cloth across my forehead?
Thank you. So, at one point in the book, you talk about pain as being something that's true within the body, but that when you express that pain to others, there is often a suspicion that somehow it might not be true or might not be to a level that the observer thinks is there. Because if it's inside the body, you can't actually see it. Um, and so that is a very frustrating thing, especially in the context of this situation here, where you're just trying to uh, get a prescription refilled that you've had filled, and yet here's a point in the system where it's not working because this doctor doesn't feel comfortable. I mean, and it's like, well, this is he doesn't have to prescribe a whole bunch of one thing. Why can't he just prescribe a couple of pills or a small dosage or what have you? Another thing that this section brings up for me is the repetition of certain things. And I love how this takes place throughout the book. Um, Sometimes, when I was reading it at first, I'd come across a phrase or something that is repeated, and the first time I'll be like, did that happen before? And I'm like, I think so, but I'm not positive. And then it'll happen again, and I'll be like, all right,
She's
I'm
doing something here.
yeah, just doing something here. I'm following this, and then so it's it's fun and interesting to track how those things change or where they appear throughout the book because everyone's like, well, are you drinking enough water? Are you doing these basic things that you should be doing if this is the issue that you're having? And yet, you, of course, you are. You're still living. You have to drink water to live. But it's I don't know. It's frustrating. It's so frustrating to read this. Like as a reader, like I'm both very frustrated and interested throughout the book of how these things happen. over and over. Um, and it's devastating to me to sit here and try to imagine uh, what you are going through in these situations. And I agree that the short sections, they help, right? Because, like you say, it's a lot. Uh, in any given section, it can be a very big moment. And you know, I'm interested in how you thought about putting in some of the things that only appear once, as opposed to some of the things that keep repeating. So, for example, um, we have different areas where you look at different tests that are taken or given uh, to figure out what the threshold of pain is, or how much the pain is, or how do we discuss pain using a measurement system, right? And that's it's both fascinating and inscrutable, because how do words exactly represent amounts of something, amounts of pain, or so on and so forth? Maybe you could just talk a little bit about how do you insert some of those things that are maybe not one off, but don't repeat as often as some of the other things.
Yeah, absolutely. The repetition was incredibly important to me, and I probably cut a lot of it that was in there more because, again, that's so true to the experience. Whether it is like having pain that just keeps showing up and just keeps showing up, or pursuing treatments, and you try this, and then a few years later you're like, well, maybe I'll try that again, and maybe it'll work this time. And that repetition is so important. I think one of my favorite parts of the book that has been there throughout, like this was in probably one of the very early drafts when it was this little like chapbook, is there's a section that says it's not. And I think it appears maybe 3 times throughout the book. And it's like, it's not in this, it's not in this. And I kind of list from tip to tail all the different parts of my body. And then as it progresses through, that section grows shorter and shorter and shorter. Like it's not in all these places. Oh, well, I guess it is in those places now. And you can just see it's, again, that repetition does the work of showing you progression of time, progression on the body. And then in terms of those sections that don't repeat and need to kind of stand alone, one of the things I did at the very end of editing was I went through, I printed everything out on single sheets, and I sectioned it all off. I had this massive line across my living room. I had like several rows of different sections. Here's the memoir section. Here are the vocabulary words. Here are the primers. Just each section had a part. And I went through and I would look through, I'd read through the whole, there were, let's say, 10 different primers, and I'd read through all those different primers. And I think of that as an entire section. Like, all right, what is missing from this story for it to be complete? What else do I need in here? Oh, I need to have a primer that talks about this. And I did that for each of the little vignette areas. And that was really important, I think, for rounding out the story. I know that towards the end, I added in more like the pain measurement. I added in a couple more of those because I'm like, this doesn't quite tell the whole story. I've only got 1 or 2. And I mean, of course, I don't tell the whole story of pain, but I try to do my best to give a summary of what's happening here. And so those sections, even though they don't appear, they're not one after the other. They are broken apart. They go throughout the text. It matters to me that they tell the whole story, kind of in that, as they lay across all the pages.
Yeah. So I'm going to end here with maybe a big philosophical question. Oh,
Sorry.
that's
Mail.
all right. So these are kind of just thoughts that I was having while reading the book. Um, and so here it is. It's how do you talk about the body through the body? How do you talk about pain through the center of that pain? You ask a lot of questions in the book. Some are hypothetical, some are direct, some are to yourself, some are to the reader. If questions are a means at understanding, and understanding is a form of control, and control quiets the mind and body, yet any particular or single body is completely unknowable by a second body. How do questions shape culture or determine the stories we tell and how we tell them?
It's a little question to end on.
Yeah, a
I
small one, easy one. Give you an easy
This is my favorite thing. Are you kidding me? I love it. Let's do this forever. So I think it's making sure we're asking the right questions, right? Like if you're gonna go to the center of something, if you're gonna take a question and like follow it through as you're talking about, make sure it's the damn right question. I think we get so focused on answers and diagnosis and like this end result, we like our eyes are just there, that I think we are so missing in many facets of our culture right now. We are missing that we are chasing answers to questions we're not asking. And so I think having a posture that ensures an openness to different questions, to a variety of questions, to not measuring other people's questions based on our own, and kind of allowing that to be our guide.
Yeah, definitely. So if you have questions about the book, you should go pick up the book out in July, The Body Alone. Nina, what's your website?
NinaLoman.com.
Easy,
LOHMAN.
easy
There it
peasy.
is. Yes,
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your questions and your really astute reading of the text. So thank you. This is really fun.
Of course. Well, take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.